Hello ladies and gentlemen, and today I am in high spirits because I get to talk about one of my favourite animes of all time, Kono motherfucking Suba. This is an anime that I wanted to talk about for a very long time. In fact, when I finally pulled the trigger on making anime videos, there were two videos that I knew for a fact that I wanted to make. The Dragon Ball video, which you've already seen, and this one. See, I told you I can watch more than just Dragon Ball. Why? How did I manage to get this much runtime out of a seemingly unassuming isekai comedy? Well, strap yourselves in, get comfy, and try not to fall asleep as I talk to myself in an empty room for over 30 minutes. Konosuba starts with main character and societal dropout Kazuma Sato leaving his room for the first time in a very long while, enduring the perils of the outside world on his way to pick up a new game. On the way home, he spots one of his classmates on course for collision with a truck. In a spur-of-the-moment decision, Kazuma jumps in front of the truck, pushing the girl out of harm's way and saving her life at the cost of his own. Upon awakening in the afterlife, Kazuma is greeted by the goddess Aqua, who offers Kazuma a chance at redemption by liberating a world ravished by the tyrannical Demon King, along with an extra perk of his choosing. When asking if the girl he saved is okay, tragedy strikes. It turns out that there was no truck, it was a slow-moving tractor that petrified Kazuma so much that he pretty much died right there on the spot. Kazuma, later growing tired of the mockery and stuck-up attitude of the goddess, decides that for his own perk, he will drag her along with him, out of nothing more than pure spite, which turns out to be completely within the laws of the contract. And so, Kazuma's journey begins in the town of Axel, where he recruits Megumin, an arch-wizard in advanced magic, and Darkness, a noble-turned-crusader. Seems like a pretty good setup so far, doesn't it? Pretty standard. In case that intro wasn't enough to tip you off, this certainly isn't a tale of heroism. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to call anyone in this party heroic. Most of the time, Kazuma's party doesn't really go off and seek danger. Danger finds them. In fact, it's quite rare for the party to venture forth to a new location, with the vast majority of the show taking place within the starting town of Axel. Starting out with no money or any resources of any kind, the majority of the opening episode is pretty much Aqua and Kazuma doing a 9 to 5. In an attempt to escape his previous reality, Kazuma is essentially thrown back into it again. Eventually, they do decide to try their hand at basic early game quest hunting, but that results in death by frog. These early episodes do a great job of setting the stage in exactly what kind of show Konosuba is. Konosuba is less about the overall plot and more about the characters' constantly evolving relationships, as well as their continued descent into notoriety despite being on the surface incompatible with each other and many a times grossly incompetent. There is a plot there, and stuff does happen, but that's not really what you're watching for, is it? The main appeal of Konosuba is the chemistry between its four main leads, and the oftentimes ridiculous scenarios that they get themselves into. If you're worried about the comedy being too esoteric, focusing heavily on RPG tropes, then fear not. While there is indeed some of that, the vast majority of the laughs comes from the characters' clashing and eccentric personalities. These characters could have an episode where all they do is watch paint dry, and I'd still watch it because what they're doing isn't important. It's how they cock it up, that's the fun bit. This is all brought to life by some of the most over-the-top, off-model facial animations I've ever seen. I swear to God, some of these are just purpose-built to be meme material. In addition to fantastic voice acting provided by both the sub and the dub. Yeah, I know, I hate the fact that I'm complimenting Crunchyroll too, but to be fair, Konosuba's dub is legitimately fucking great. I definitely still prefer the sub. There's a couple of line alterations and deliveries that don't hit quite as hard. In fact, in some ways, it can actually be a benefit to the show's comedy, since the jokes are delivered when they actually get spoken rather than being partially spoiled by the subtitles. Konosuba is crass, offensive, and over the top, and if you're somebody that prefers a more family-friendly approach to their entertainment, yeah, you better stay away from this. In fact, I imagine the fact that I'm even covering this in the first place is gonna divide some of my audience, but fuck it. I created this channel to celebrate things I love, and I'm not gonna back down now. Suffice to say, Konosuba's got a bit of a reputation online. Nevertheless, I love this show, and I hope that by the end of this video, you may be inclined to give it a chance yourself if you haven't seen it. perhaps I can convince you that it's more than just a silly comedy. So with that, let's take a closer look at the party. Aqua is a water goddess whose head is about as empty as a YouTuber's apology. Aqua is extremely stupid, often being the impetus for the many mishaps the groups find themselves in. So stupid in fact that despite having near perfect stats, her intelligence cancels that out pretty much. And regardless of how much she levels up, it never gets any higher. On top of that, her extreme vanity and status as a goddess often leads her to become entitled and incredibly lazy. In addition, due to her less flattering traits, she's cultivated her own extremist group known as the Axis sect, a group that is so sycophantic in nature that they will emotionally manipulate and abuse anybody into joining their cause. This has led to her garnering a pretty poor perception among the people of this world, to the point where nobody even knows who she is. This stands in stark contrast to her colleague Eris, who not only takes the job more seriously, taking over her duties in her absence, but also has an entire currency named after her. Despite this though, Aqua isn't what I'd call malicious a lot of the time. Most of the situations she gets the group into do at least have some sort of sound reason behind it, if you don't think about it for more than a few seconds. And while her genuine attempts to help Kazuma often ends in failure, she does at least come from a good place most of the time. There's also the fact that her status as a goddess means that she attracts the undead, meaning that she is quite literally a magnet for trouble. She also has the unique distinction of being the only woman that Kazuma is not sexually attracted to in any way, which is saying a lot. While her combat abilities may not be anything spectacular, she does provide a massive boon to the party with multi-rares as well as a near infinite pool of mana, which in my view is enough to make up for all the trouble she causes. Essentially meaning that as long as she doesn't die herself, the party is pretty much indestructible. Aqua's relationship with Kazuma is where most of the comedy comes from. It's incredibly charming to just see these two bicker over the most petty shit, it's great. Kazuma a lot of the time is framed as her caretaker, often scolding her like a child and giving her an allowance when he gets rich. What's funny is that Aqua doesn't really have a problem with manual labour. In fact, whenever she does decide to get off her lazy ass, she does actually work really hard. She's also well liked in the town thanks to her happy-go-lucky personality and her various party tricks. I think my favourite moments in this series involving Aqua is when she gets scammed into buying a chicken egg, thinking that it's going to hatch into a dragon. Even after hatching, she is adamant that he's just not grown up yet. It's funny, but it's also genuinely sweet to see her give so much love and attention to her pet. And it's in these moments where you do see why she's a goddess. It's also hilarious given that she can barely look after herself most of the time. Next up is Megumin. She's pretty popular with fans and it's not really hard to see why. Out of all of Kazuma's companions, I would class her as the most normal of the bunch, which is not a high bar to clear by any stretch, but hailing from the Crimson Demon clan, a genetically engineered race of mages, she possesses a high degree of intelligence and potent magic potential. She became an adventurer to make a name for herself and to provide for her family who can just barely scrape by. She is by far Kazuma's strongest ally in terms of raw strength, wielding the deadly explosion magic, capable of killing nearly any enemy in a single blow. And it's a damn good thing too, because that single blow is literally all she's got in her. After blowing her load, not only can she not cast the spell again for a whole day, but she then has to have a little sleep. The bigger problem is that explosion magic is her only magic. Oh, she has the ability to learn other magic, but why would you do that when you could just create a bigger explosion? For Megumin, explosion magic isn't just a tool of destruction, it's somewhat of an art for her, something that she's truly passionate about. As a result, she's viewed somewhat as wasted potential among the Crimson Demons, being touted as a prodigy, failing to accomplish those lofty expectations. She ends up joining Kazuma's party after many other rejections. While Megumin's obsession with explosion magic is played for laughs a lot of the time, it also makes her incredibly endearing, which, combined with her somewhat stable personality, makes her a good straight man when the situation calls for it. She also has a best friend called Yuyun, who she treats rather poorly, though despite her protests to the contrary, she does actually care a lot about her, being the only real friend that she had up until Kazuma came along. She also has a little sister called Komeko, who is equal parts adorable as she is an agent of chaos. Megumin has also gotten her own spin-off, detailing her life in the Crimson Demon Village, her education, as well as the lead up to her meeting Kazuma. I've only ever watched the anime adaptation, I haven't gotten around to reading the light novel yet. That being said, it's a decent watch, nowhere near as funny as the main series, and it really demonstrates the point that Konosuba works best when the main cast is a unit, but the bits and pieces of backstory that we do get do a good job of fleshing out her character, and some other actions in this series do have some funny consequences for the main series. Overall, I'd say it's worth checking out, just not on the same level of peak as the main series. Darkness is a runaway noble who became an adventurer to find some excitement in her life. Excitement in massive air quotes. Horny does not even begin to describe this character. She has, some very acquired tastes. She is so much of a glutton for punishment that she chose to be a crusader purely to take a bigger beating. There's also the fact that despite being the party shield, her attacks hit less than one of my shitty jokes. Despite being a colossal pervert, she does mature when the situation calls for it and is always looking out for the group. Out of all the characters in Kazuma's party, she's undoubtedly the most one-note. While she does develop a bit later on in the series, she doesn't really have that same chaotic presence like Aqua, nor does she have the depth of Megumin. A lot of the jokes surrounding her are still funny, especially when taken to the extreme, however it can get very repetitive since the punchline never really changes. Which brings us to the final member of our band of societal fuck-ups, the true gender equalitist himself, Kazuma. I've deliberately left Kazuma for last because out of all the characters in this show, he not only has the most depth, but is by far the most interesting. Now, Kazuma may seem like your average dude. In fact, it's pointed out in the story that both Kazuma and Sato are both incredibly common names in Japan. He's designed to be as generic as they come. He's not ridiculously OP, he can't do wacky shit like fire rockets out of his dick or time travel. He is, for all intents and purposes, not special at all. And yet, he's one of the best protagonists, I think, in all of anime. You know something I really fucking hate about the portrayal of nerd types in anime is that they're always portrayed as these misunderstood, sympathetic, uwu, so shy guys that, despite their social ineptitude, still have like 3 girls pining for them at the same time. And it's just not true. Guys, level me for a sec, okay? Let's be honest here. While I'm sure there are some of us that do struggle and are at the mercy of some unfortunate ridicule, thereby confining ourselves to our quarters, for the vast majority of us, that's not really the case, is it? Most of us keep ourselves immersed in our hobbies, not because we can't cope, but because the world we inhabit is batshit insane. For a lot of us, we'd rather not get roped into drama that doesn't involve us in favour of living a quiet life of solitude. See, this is what I love about Kazuma, right? He's not painted as a downtrodden, sympathetic figure. When Kazuma and Aqua first arrive in the guild, he's quick to mingle and gather intel from the locals. Not only does this tell us that Kazuma has a deep-seated knowledge of video games, specifically RPGs, but he, as a person, is socially capable. He's not a shut-in through society rejecting him, he rejected society. This is a bit glossed over in the anime, but in Volume 5 of the light novel, we do actually get a slight glimpse into Kazuma's backstory. So, there was a girl that he had a crush on for a large chunk of his childhood, and one day, when he finally decided that he would tell her how he felt, he spotted her with a delinquent biker. He made his own assumptions from there. This incident affected Kazuma so much that he decided to nope out of society altogether. He would leave for school and then come home to play video games and read manga when he could confirm his parents were out of the house. Konosuba, put it simply, is a story about Kazuma being forced kicking and screaming to face the reality around him regardless of the pain and the inconveniences that it may cause him. The ultimate irony being that his life in Japan would have been way easier had he not been a shut-in. Kazuma is a pathetic character, there's really no other way to put it. He's perverted, often willing to take the easy way out when it presents itself, and is highly abrasive. So why then do I and many others love this character? Well, there's a few reasons for that. The first is that compared to the copious amount of blank slate self-insert wish fulfillment characters, he is undoubtedly his own man. And that alone is a breath of fresh air. Kazuma has a mix of both good and bad qualities, making him a lot less predictable than your average protagonist of this type. Despite being of the weakest class with piss poor stats outside of luck, which is counterbalanced by his teammates, Kazuma's knowledge of RPGs and his above average intelligence is the glue that holds the team together. This is further emphasised in the light novel, where in the battle with the Dullahan, Kazuma gets the idea to use water to kill it. As often in RPGs, undead creatures are weak to water, something that was changed in the anime where he only came up with the plan after noticing the enemy was actively avoiding water. Thanks to being an adventurer, he has the ability to learn all skills from every class, just not to an advanced level. This leads him to acquire skills like Steal, Sneak and Drain Touch, skills that while not useful on their own can be incredibly useful in covering the shortcomings of his teammates. Thanks to him tangling with the Devil King's generals and somehow ending up on top disproportionate to his own strength, Kazuma gains a reputation of being sneaky and underhanded, a label that I don't really think is very fair, to be honest, since they challenge him because they're cocky and arrogant and they know for a fact that they can win. I really don't think there's anything wrong with Kazuma thinking outside the box. Kazuma abides by a very simple code of logic. If you're nice to me, then I'm nice to you. Fuck with me, and I'll fuck with you. Kazuma may be a coward at times, but he sure as hell ain't a bitch. He can see all the tropes and cliches coming from a mile away, and he isn't about to play that game. I think the best way I can showcase the appeal of a character like Kazuma is through his first meeting with Mitsurugi. So, for context, the gang has just finished purifying a nearby lake because Aqua wanted money and decided to take on a solo job with minimal assistance from the group. On their way back, they come across Mitsurugi, another adventurer from Kazuma's world who was bestowed a sacred sword by Aqua and made a name for himself as one of the best adventurers in the land. Mitsurugi, noticing Aqua, immediately comes up to her and tries to take her away from Kazuma's party, despite being cool where she is, and also not knowing who the fuck he is. This is funny because despite Mitsurugi being told he's some one-of-a-kind hero, he's actually nothing special at all. Mitsurugi then challenges Kazuma to a duel, taking Aqua if he wins. Kazuma, sensing where this is going, gets the jump on him, steals his weapon, knocks him out and then sells said weapon for cash. Mitsurugi is the archetypal hero who, under any other circumstance, would have been who we were rooting for. However, we've been following Kazuma, and while he may not have that much power, the power that he does have, he's had to work for. All of the things that he has accomplished and will accomplish are the result of his ingenuity, quick wits and genuine teamwork. We are well aware that his life isn't exactly easy, so to have somebody like Mitsurugi come in, somebody who's only where he is because of a cheat item, threatening to take one of his companions away without even consulting said person about what they feel about it, makes him look like a complete dickhead. In addition, to go up to somebody and challenge them to a duel, fully knowing that the odds are stacked in your favour, makes him at best dishonourable and cowardly, or at worst a downright bully. Mitsurugi comes off like one of those out-of-touch celebrities. You know, despite doing fuck all, still feel the need to tell normal people how to live their lives when they're just getting by doing the 9 to 5. Kazuma may be a dick, no doubt, but he is 100% in the right here, and that's what I love about him. Despite his cowardice in many situations, when confronted by somebody who is clearly out of line and wants to fuck him over, he claps back, and he claps back hard. It is so satisfying to watch because, more often than not, these people genuinely deserve it. And while it may come off as underhanded sometimes, you have to understand that this world preys on weak individuals who don't know how to stand their ground. We see this through Megumin's best friend Union and Wiz the shopkeeper, characters that are among some of the most likeable in the whole show, but whose kindness are ripe for exploitation. And that's the other thing, when surrounded by characters like this, Kazuma is literally just a normal, upstanding guy. Despite his oftentimes questionable morality, he often does the right thing even when he doesn't need to, not taking any credit or reward for resolving problems that were unknowingly caused by his party. And I mean, come on, you can't really hate a man that vouches for the equality of others.
都合のいい時だけ女の権利を主張し、都合の悪い時は男のくせにとか言っちゃう輩は許さない人間だ。
I mean, I'm not saying he's got a point, but
he's out of line, but he's right.
A character like Kazuma is insanely difficult to get right because you're constantly on a tightrope. You don't want to make him too much of an asshole. He's still the one we're supposed to be rooting for, but you still want to see him get his comeuppance when he genuinely deserves it. At the same time, you also need to make sure that a lot of the fuck-ups that do happen are directly out of his control, for the sake of comedy and sympathy. The few times Kazuma does do something heinous unprovoked, he's almost always punished for it. The catch is that you just don't know when he'll be punished for it. This can lead to scenarios where a punishment for a situation he wasn't in control of is made exponentially worse by poor actions he made earlier in the series. In fact, one could argue that Aqua's fuck-ups are also Kazuma's fault too, because the only reason why she's here in the first place is because of his spiteful actions. It's a very delicate balance that makes us maintain sympathy for Kazuma despite being a douche a lot of the time. Okay, so with all these negative traits, why would anybody want to hang out with Kazuma in the first place? While Kazuma does have a lot going against him, I wouldn't necessarily classify him as a bad person. He's not heroic, and he often shirks responsibility if it doesn't directly concern him, but when the chips are down, he always manages to come through when it matters. In addition, he's also fiercely loyal to those close to him, most of the time. They bicker, but should anything happen to anybody in his party, Kazuma will go to the ends of the earth for them, even if it means impoverishing himself in the process. He's not super virtuous, don't get me wrong, but he's nowhere near this evil degenerate that certain spaces will have you believe. This is also why, for as funny as they are, I don't think Season 1 and 2 of the anime are really a good representation of his character taken on their own. Don't get me wrong, the anime adaptation is fantastic. It's a riot from start to finish, and I wouldn't be making this video if I didn't thoroughly enjoy them. However, you have to understand that Seasons 1 and 2 were the only pieces of the anime for the longest time, and they collectively only cover the first 4 volumes in what is supposed to be a 17-part story. During this early stage of the novel, the party is still working through their growing pains and are not fully comfortable with each other yet. It's around volume 5 with the Crimson Demon Village arc where the series starts to further develop the relationship between these characters rather than purely focusing on comedy. Which is also why I was incredibly happy at the announcement of a 3rd season, as along with the movie, it does a great job of showcasing that despite their differences, these characters really do care about each other. In addition, Kazuma and Megumin's eventual romance is surprisingly sweet and develops steadily throughout the series. When Megumin first tells Kazuma that she likes him, Kazuma just brushes it off at first. After all, they do just tend to play pranks on each other. Kazuma is in sheer disbelief that anybody would feel that way about him, especially since that he's well aware of his flaws. It's moments like this in the show where, despite all the bravado and the confidence that he shows when speaking his mind, Kazuma is really insecure and doesn't really think all that highly of himself. It's where we get to see that scared person who locked himself in his room over one heartbreak. Megumin is aware of all of Kazuma's shortcomings. However, she's also quick to point out that he's still let her in the party despite her own shortcomings when nobody else would. He carries her home after she's immobile from using explosion magic. He doesn't have to do that, but he does. He's willing to go on walks with her so she can do her daily explosion, and even engaged with her on the subject, creating a mutual interest between the two. In the light novel, we also learn that Kazuma pays for Megumin's meals and basic necessities so that she can provide for her family. And that Megumin knows that despite how much he'll tell you otherwise, he genuinely loves and cares about his friends and will do anything to help them when they're in trouble. Kazuma, despite all his rough edges, is a good person. The biggest testament to that fact is at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, after seeing Kazuma die more than a few times, Megumin makes the reluctant decision to finally learn advanced magic so she can no longer be a burden to Kazuma and keep the party safe. Not wanting to do it herself, she gives Kazuma her adventurer card. Someone who, at this point, could make life a whole lot easier for himself. But that's not Kazuma. That's not what he does. Instead, he buffs her explosion magic, resulting in the biggest and best explosion she's ever casted. Despite his grievances, Kazuma would never put his own convenience if it meant destroying Megumin's happiness. He chose to support his friend's passion, knowing how much it meant to her, and Megumin, being a source of mockery by her people for a long time, is overjoyed that somebody actually took the time and engaged with her on how she felt. What a fucking Chad. Like I say, the biggest flaw of the anime adaptation is that there just isn't enough of it. Season 3 was great, but it took way too long to come out, and being brutally honest, I wasn't even sure they were going to make a third season. The light novel had already been complete for years at this point, and since the anime's main purpose is promoting the source material, I wasn't sure we'd ever get a third season, or indeed any seasons beyond that. That being the case, I decided to commit a mortal sin, something utterly deplorable, something disgusting as my status as a gamer. I read a fucking book. 17 of them to be exact. If you're curious and you've enjoyed the anime, I highly recommend the Konosuba light novel. It is fantastic. The story is told with Kazuma acting as a narrator, a bit like the anime, which makes it incredibly easy to read going from that medium. Not only do we hear a lot more of Kazuma's inner thoughts, further fleshing him out as a character and providing some good comedy, there are entire scenes that are just straight up omitted from the anime. In particular, the party's first encounter with Wiz at the cemetery, who just shows up in the anime like she's always been there. And while there is a lot more focus on character development in the later part of the series, there is a healthy helping of hilarious scenes that, despite not having the exaggerated art of the anime, still had me in stitches when reading. Now obviously, since these are books and they don't really have that many pictures in them, you'll have to excuse me if what I'm saying doesn't exactly match up with the footage on screen, but just I want to talk about these books, alright, because I think they're fantastic. One of my favourite light novel arcs is where, because Kazuma and his crew have gained so much notoriety from killing the Devil King's generals, the town of Axel suddenly finds itself very, very wealthy, which means a tax audit. The richest of all the inhabitants, and the one who has to pay the most, being Kazuma. So, as a loophole to not lose half of his wealth, he intentionally gets himself thrown in prison for a day as a form of legal exemption. Based as fuck. Like, seriously, I can't believe they made a whole fucking story about taxes, and it's still funny. This particular story also has a really wholesome twist to it that I won't spoil, but you should definitely read it for yourself if you're curious. Another major change is with the character Dust, a character that I didn't even remember was in the anime. That's how little of a presence he had. He essentially acts as Kazuma's counterpart, only more pathetic and without the admirable goal of equal rights for all. When Kazuma gets thrown in prison after the fallout with the Mobile Fortress Destroyer, Dust is actually in the cell with him in the light novel. The only reason why he's there is because he's too lazy to work, and so he gets himself thrown in prison on purpose so he can take advantage of free food and shelter. There's also an original story where Dust incorrectly assumes that Kazuma's got it easy, that he's just building a harem for himself. So in order to show him the true horrors of his reality, Kazuma and Dust swap teams. Kazuma gets on really well, Dust's party even offering him a space if he's interested. Dust on the other hand couldn't even start his quest, that's how badly they fucked up. When I said Kazuma was the glue that held this team together, I absolutely meant it. Dust is popular enough to get his own light novel spin-off. Again, I haven't read it, I've probably got to do that again at some point. There's also an incident, I believe in volume 15, involving Aqua. Now, we all know that Aqua can be very spoiled and whiny a lot of the time. However, in this one particular instance, what results genuinely leaves Aqua feeling broken and upset. And Kazuma, once again going to bat for his friend, does what is simultaneously one of the most shocking, heartwarming, hilarious, and most Kazuma-like thing he's ever done in the whole series. Aqua may get under Kazuma's skin a lot of the time, but this moment is just proof of how much these two trust each other. And if you've read it, you know exactly which moment I'm talking about. I pray that one day we get to see it animated. I'm intentionally not giving you much context here because again, I want you to read these books for yourself. Let's just say that Kazuma isn't blowing smoke. When he says he's going to do something, he's a man of his word. The absolute best part of the light novel is that it's a complete story. Compared to other series as well, it's not even that long. I'm going to talk a bit about the ending of the series, so I'll say it again. If you enjoy the anime in any capacity, please consider taking the time to read the light novel. Half the reason why I'm even making this video is because I want more people to read the books, so if you do decide to pick them up after watching this video, it would mean an awful lot to me. If you wish to avoid spoilers, skip to this time on screen, or find the skip in the description below for your own convenience. During the final volume of Konosuba, Aqua ends up making her way to the Devil King's castle after an argument with the group, leaving the party no choice but to rescue her before she does anything stupid. Before they can do that, however, they need to be fully equipped. Kazuma ends up investing in a bunch of level reset potions from Wiz's shop. Ordinarily, much like the other things that Wiz sells, this wouldn't usually be useful. However, Kazuma has realised for a while now that his stats have plateaued regardless of how much he levels up. Using this information, he enlists the help of both Wiz and Banir to help kill monsters in a nearby dungeon. While his stats don't change much, the EXP requirement needed for unlocking skills does. In addition, he still retains all the skills prior to the reset. Doing this, Kazuma is able to amass a wide variety of skills from the people in Axel, acting as both a symbol for the thing that he's trying to protect, as well as his growth as a character as a whole. This is a culmination of all the experience and relationships that Kazuma has cultivated on his journey. In addition, he also invests in a huge sack of manatite, which Megumin uses to obliterate the barrier surrounding the castle. So they go in, they get Aqua out, and at this point, Kazuma doesn't really have any reason to stick around. Up until this point, all the fights that they've been in have been purely circumstantial. This time, however, Kazuma goes out of his way to fight the Demon King alone. Using a combination of his wits and every tool at his disposal, Kazuma ends up putting up a good fight. However, he ends up cornered. So, using the last of his manatite and his remaining skill points, Kazuma casts Explosion, ultimately securing victory against the Demon King, but sacrificing his own life in the process. If this final journey and his skill set was supposed to be a representation of everything he's done up until this point, then I honestly think it's fitting that the winning move was given to him by the one person that's arguably made the most impact on Kazuma's life. Kazuma wakes up once again, this time greeted by both Aqua and Eris. However, this time something's wrong. Aqua is genuinely crying, something that takes Kazuma by surprise. With his body completely disintegrated in the explosion, she can't bring Kazuma back this time. He's given one of two options. He could either be reborn in Japan as a baby, be born into a life of luxury, wealth, and with a beautiful wife, or he could be reborn in Axel, but without the memories of his previous life. I'm pretty sure you can all see where this is going. As a consolation prize for defeating the Demon King, Kazuma unlocks a third option. He can be given his body back and returned to life in Axel. This opportunity has presented itself to Kazuma throughout the series. Many times he could have freed himself from the constant hardships from this backwards world. And yet, try as he might, subconsciously the thought of leaving this life behind, whether he wants to admit it or not, leaves him feeling sad, even to the point of tears. This time is no different. Kazuma, despite acknowledging the trials and tribulations that no doubt lay ahead of him, he's already made up his mind the moment the opportunity presented itself. And with that he replies, "Please take me back to that good-for-nothing world that I hate so much." Konosuba, despite its appearances as a dumb, or as less cultured individuals would say, trashy show, is a story that ends up coming away with a relatable, not terribly complex, but hard-hitting message. The world you inhabit may suck sometimes. In fact, you may even question what you did to be forced to live there in the first place. However, though there may be moments that will test you, there are also moments of great joy, unforgettable adventures, and treasured bonds waiting to be forged. Sure, you may have it hard sometimes, but it's those moments that are worth salvaging, that are worth protecting and fighting for. This message could even be applied to individuals as much as the world itself. On a surface level, you'd have a hard time convincing anybody that Kazuma's party isn't just full of horrible, selfish people. But together, through the application of their positive traits and covering for each other's weaknesses, they're able to become more than the sum of their parts, accomplishing feats that more talented people could never do. Kazuma's transformation, as a pathetic kid that shielded himself away from the world largely out of fear from getting hurt, somebody who hated the world and tried everything he could to escape from it, to becoming a confident badass who fought and died to protect that very same world and still chose to come back for more, is so fucking powerful, man. I wasn't joking when I said I love Kazuma. His character arc is genuinely inspiring. Konosuba is a show that I've gone back to several times just to kick back and relax, and while at first I was just there for the laughs, I stayed for the heart. Something I wanted to talk about that I didn't quite know where to fit in were the opening and endings. These are fantastic. The openings are basically self-contained mini-adventures with the group messing everything up and yet still somehow managing to get the job done anyway. Couldn't ask for a better representation of the show. The endings, on the other hand, are a lot more subdued, instead focusing on the quieter moments with the characters going about their day-to-day lives. The cherry on top is that the ending song is sung by the main characters taking it in turns. It's actually quite beautiful. This is one of my favourite This is one of my favourite pieces of fiction of all time. Look, I'll level with you for a second. I'm not all that confident in my ability to review anime. I don't consider myself very good at this. So if I'm going to make a video on a series, it has to be something that I'm truly passionate about. The fact that this is the first anime outside of Dragon Ball that I'm talking about should tell you just how much I love this series. And the moment it was decided that I would do videos on anime, this was already locked in from the start. Sitting down every Wednesday evening and seeing some of my favourite moments from the novel animated, as well as just getting to spend time with these characters again, has honestly been one of the biggest highlights of my year. And while I still don't know if we're going to get seasons beyond season 3, I can only hope that we will. Above everything I've talked about in this video, like forget waxing philosophical or all this other pretentious shit, the reason why I like Konosuba so much is that it's just fun. In a world where people are constantly at each other's throats for no end of reasons, it's nice to just have a show, to have a piece of entertainment that just wants to make you laugh and remind you that, hey, life may be shit sometimes, but it can also hold great delights if you're willing to stick with it. So, to conclude, watch Konosuba, read the light novels, and keep that chin up. This has been Jack, and I shall see you in the next video. Cheers for watching.